Hey guys, so in this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the EcoWorthy SL3500. And as the name implies, this is a 3500 watt inverter. It runs on 48 volt batteries. So this is an all-in-one unit. You can hook solar to it. You can hook grid to it as well to be able to charge the batteries or for grid bypass. And it's also on a dolly, as you guys can see there. So this is meant to compete with a power station, essentially. So it's sort of a blend of some of the all-in-one inverters like we're used to seeing with the dolly portion of it to make it a little more portable. And in the past, we've seen some people build 3,000 watt and 5,000 watt small all-in-one inverters with some rack batteries on dollies themselves. So I'm guessing that's where this concept came from for EcoWorthy. So on the AC side of things, like I said, it is a 3,500 watt inverter. It can charge at 40 amps if you use grid bypass as well. And then on the DC side of things, like I said, this is a 48 volt system here. So these are 48 volt batteries, two of them. These are both 50 amp hour batteries. And then when it comes to solar, this can bring in 4,000 watts. The voltage is a little more problematic on this as far as the PV, because we're used to seeing some really high numbers when it comes to the all-in-one units that you can put on the wall there. So the ones that I mentioned building carts with, the people who are building carts with, they're usually in the 400 to 500 volt range for PV. But this, the maximum voltage you can put into this is 145 volts. And the operating range is 60 volts to 115 volts. But they list the amperage input on this at 50 amps, which I really can't picture that. I mean, you'd have basically everything in parallel, I guess. Your entire array would be in parallel to reach that 4,000 watts. That's a lot of amperage, considering the heat on that. So I don't really know how. Anyway, I'll look at the PV connections. I'll check that out. So one more thing I want to cover is this is single phase output, so 3,500 watts, but you can parallel these units. You can have another one stacked on top. As a matter of fact, the cart that this came with actually came with an extra shelf. I just didn't install the extra one because it would have been empty. But you can have a whole other shelf there with two more of these 50 amp hour batteries, and then you can have a whole nother unit on top here. And then you can have split phase power, or you can have 7,000 watts of single phase power, whichever one you wanted. And there's a lot of other stuff that came with the unit, and I can show you guys over here in a second, but this is part of the parallel kit here. So that way, two of these could communicate with each other, and you'd get split phase, 7,000 watts of split phase output. And I'll give you a closer look, but it comes with a handle, so you can roll this entire thing around. It's on casters down below. So let's get started, guys. I'll show you the exterior of the unit. We can do some testing, and then I'll discuss some of the things I would probably do differently and tweak on this unit. So these are the two batteries, metal case. They're actually nice, little tiny baby things. They're easy to lift into the cart, pretty easy to get everything assembled, like I said. The front of the unit here, we have a 30 amp 120 volt outlet. Then we have three 20 amp outputs right here, just a standard wall outlet. Then over here, this is how you would adjust the menu options. And this menu, if you guys have seen the 3,000 watt, EG4 3,000 watt inverter, this is essentially what the menu you'd see on that. It looks basically the exact same. Then over here is the on-off switch, pretty simple stuff. Let's go over to the left of the unit. I'll show you guys the input and output they have there. So this is on the left of the unit here, and you can see we have your hot leg, neutral, ground, and this is AC input. And then the AC output, we have ground, your leg again, and neutral. PV input, again, for 50 amps, you'd need to be able to put a 6 gauge PV wire in there. I can't picture that. I'm not sure there. And then we have a DC circuit breaker right here for the PV input. So let me show you something here. So when you take that flap off of the outside, this is what you'd see on the inside. They actually do have circuit breakers in here for the AC input and output. These are both 63 amp breakers. And coming off the PV here, we have 105 degrees Celsius 11 gauge wire. Yeah, it says 11 gauge wire. That's a bit odd. So my guess is with the specs that they had on the PV, they're probably just talking about the circuit breaker they have for the PV itself being 50 amp rated. Not sure what's going on there with that, but yeah, you've only got 11 gauge wire once you get into the unit. So normally I save towards the end, I'll save kind of a list of things that I would probably do different, but I'm going to keep a running tab as we go. So we've got the 2 circuit breakers here. This is AC in, AC out. So down below are these here, the input and output. I would prefer to have something like this. If you're already going to have to take the top of this unit off anyway, which I'm not too fond of that either, I'd prefer to have the breakers right here and the connection right here. But if they want to do this type of setup, then I would have these grommets here go through, tension around the wire, hook everything inside the unit itself so it's safe. This, I mean, granted, it is hooked into the unit there, but these wires could pull right out. The thing is on casters. So anything you can do to mitigate that, and these really help because they can ratchet around the wire. So the tighter you make it, the tighter it's going to get around the wire. So that's one thing they could do there to help. Also, like I said, these units are meant to stack on top of each other. So if you have this one here and you have a whole other unit on top of it, that means you can't get to any of the circuit breakers or anything inside the bottom unit. So that's not the best idea there if you have 2 of them for split phase output. Let's just pop this the rest of the way off. I want to see the rest of the inverter inside here. So for the AC input and output, they have 200 degrees Celsius 11 gauge wire. And on the battery input, main positive, looks like, yeah, main negative as well, are both 7 gauge 200 degrees Celsius. Actually pretty simple looking build. A lot of other inverters I've looked at are sort of busy inside. Huh. Not bad on the wire management. Check this out. It's pretty neat. That's like a main bus bar for the AC side of things. This is L1. Over here, though, the black is neutral. So they actually should have had that as a white wire. It's a little less confusing. But the black right there is neutral. And then they've got it split off to each of these outlets. So 30 amp outlet there, 20 amp there. Yeah, you'd have to follow all the black and red instead of black and white. All right, I'm going to get the cover back on and show you guys the battery side of things. But yeah, wouldn't you guys think, as far as like in here, if you had one of those grommets there, you could do all the wiring inside of here. And this cover would be essentially like one of the all-in-one wall mount units. Everything could be done right in here. They probably should have a shield right there in between all the heat sinks and everything so that you could do all your wiring inside of here. Be safer. It would just be nicer all around, I think. But why have a 50 amp breaker on here for the PV side of things and then have an 11 gauge wire coming off of it? I mean, the point of the breaker is not, I guess in this case, they're just using it as a disconnect. But that's sort of odd to me. I'll show you why I think that's odd, that they have it for the PV, because I'll show you around the other side. So on the right side of the unit here is where all the battery connections are. We have positive, negative. Ecoworthy sent 2 gauge cable to go in between each battery here and then to the inverter. So anyway, they sent 1 extra of the positives. So that's with the tape there. I didn't want to confuse you guys. So there is black on the negative. That reminds me, I need to kink this cable so I can get the cover on. I want to be a good influence for you guys. Show that. Hold on one second. All right, that's the only way that'll work. Be able to get the covers on all the terminals. Okay, let me talk about this stuff first, and then I'll mention the issues. So they have an RS485-2, a 1, USB connection, and then down here would be where all your parallel connections are that I showed you those wires before. So this is where you would hook it to the second inverter. My main issue on this side here is the fact that it does not have overcurrent protection. We're relying on the BMS. So the BMS on both these batteries, they have under voltage, over voltage protection. They have all that on the BMS. but you need a breaker in between here. So of all places to put a breaker, it wouldn't have been on the PV side. There's a lot of different all-in-one inverters that still do not have a PV disconnect and certainly don't have a PV breaker, but this does, which is really odd to me. Like, why not put a breaker over here for the batteries? That is such an odd design. So they don't have any breaker, any overcurrent protection for this here, but they did provide a means of disconnect. So I'll show you that here in just a second. So this is what they're providing as a means of disconnect between the batteries and inverter. Granted, again, there's no overcurrent protection, but this is a way to shut the inverter off from the batteries, disconnect them completely. Because right now, even with these off, and I actually have the switch off to this, it's going to have a slow draw from these batteries. Plus, if you install these directly, you're going to get a spark. And if you have this off and you install it, at least you're not going to see the spark on the outside. But yeah, this is what they supplied. So my problem with these is that they are not rated for over 48 volts. And as you guys well know, these packs are 16 in series. So you're talking 51.2 volts nominal. And you can go all the way up to 58 volts. So that's well above the rated voltage for these switches. Matter of fact, hold on. I have the little thing that came with it. And you can see there, right on that line here, 12 to 48 volts DC. So it does not go to the voltage that this pack is going to be rated for. So this is not a proper means of disconnect between the batteries and the inverter. Also, they really don't even give a proper means of mounting this on something. Even if you wanted to do that, I'll show you a picture of what I saw online. And I think it's like during their assembly, but they never show the finished product. The manual doesn't show the finished product. So it's like you could strap it or screw it on somewhere or just let it hang off on the wires there. I do have that extra shelf. So if I put the extra shelf and left it empty, you could put like this on the shelf and just have the inverter above it up here. So you could do that. It's just, yeah, that's not well thought out at all. Over here, this is some of the stuff that comes with it. This is going to hook into the RS485 part of the inverter. It's a wireless dongle. So you can have Wi-Fi with this unit and monitor it remotely. There's an extra couple cables. These are longer cables here than the ones I had over there. And reason being, these can go in between. When you add that extra shelf, they can go in between the shelf and that if you wanted. And this is the parallel kit, like I mentioned. All right, so for a little bit of load testing, we have 1,470 watts. I think it's showing right there on the unit. So shouldn't be too hard to get up to that limit. Let me hook a heat gun to it. We'll get right around 3,000 watts with that. This little thing spooled up. It's actually kind of loud. $3,100. So I'm going to have to get something else to get to that full output. Well, that's a pain in the butt. What else could I get? Ooh, a little over. 3,800 watts. Got a warning on it. Let's unplug one of the heat lights. Ah, I was close to that point. Let me see if I can get it right at the 3,500 watts. With the loads I've got in the shop right now, it's actually kind of hard to get it right at that 3,500 watts. I end up getting into the 3,600 watt range. It seems to do okay, though. I think it probably holds steady. It holds at 34 fine. So I don't think it's going to have an issue holding at 3,500 watts. 33, 34. Doesn't have a problem. It got upset when I just had it at 3,600, so it's still showing overload. Probably temperature. Yeah. Fans are kicking in the back. Tell you what. Yeah, there is definitely a lot of airflow on this little unit. I've got it set back up with no loads on it now, so let's see what it looks like. Let's see if it can run Just the saw alone. Okay, so I can do that. Not bad. Wonder what the limit is. 750 watts, and then run the saw. Yeah, that would be its limit. So the saw alone is pretty much the limit of that inverting power. All right, guys, so in summary, I like the concept because I really do think there is probably going to be a market for something like this where you have a blend between the two, the off-grid inverters that we've been used to seeing and a rolling cart. So something mobile if you needed it, something you could keep in the corner of your shop in case of a power outage. So yeah, this is almost there. This is on the way there. But it's sort of like concept versus reality. Like the concept of this and then actually building it and putting it together. It seems like there was people in different departments that didn't necessarily communicate well together. It reminds me of when I would build houses and I would have the HVAC people, the electricians, and the plumbers. Those are the main three that do all the interior work, all the fancy stuff. And none of them really knew who was supposed to put the dryer vent in. So where the dryer vent would go out of the house, like the HVAC guy would like, no, I'm doing the AC. And the electrician would be like, well, no, everything I do is electrical. Why would I run any ducting? Although they did it for the bathroom fans. Anyway, it seems like one guy had the cart build, one guy had the inverter, and then the batteries. And they never quite communicated there. They were doing the, that's not quite my job, or that's not my job. I'll leave it to the other guy. So I like the fact that this inverter, this whole setup is mobile. It can roll around, like I mentioned before. I do like the fact that it's a 48 volt setup. So if you wanted to expand this, if you wanted to get some bus bars or something and hook it up to some of the rack batteries, the cheaper rack batteries too, I really like that. Like they have these two. You can buy another two when you add the second inverter on if you wanted to do that. But at that point, you can still add more batteries on. Like there's no limit really to the amount of 48 volt batteries you could put on the system. It just wouldn't be mobile anymore. And that's kind of where things get a little blurry here, where this is mobile but not mobile. Like the plugs there in the front, they're going to be for the single phase output, the 120 volt. When you're into the split phase part of things, you're going to need to use the grid output on this side. And it's just kind of a funky setup. Like, if this isn't mobile, if this is stationary, it's got wheels, and then you're hooking it directly to the grid with this setup here, then it's no longer a blend. It's just basically an off-grid inverter on wheels instead, but that you're not moving. So in my opinion, the real benefit of something like this is when you can use the plug there. So if you had two of these and they had a parallel plug kit like you'd see on an Ecoworthy or something like that, and you could plug into a 240 volt 30 amp outlet of 450 amp, whatever, on the front or on the side or whatever, then it would make more sense. It's still mobile. You can still plug it in and hook it into an auto transfer switch or something like that. Then it sort of makes sense. But to have it when it's with split phase power, but then you have to hardwire it to both of these, and then hardwire it to the house, then the wheels sort of don't make sense. Also, the battery capacity that would come with that is a little bit light. So again, concept versus reality. This needs work, in my opinion. Like the amperage you would need to be able to get the max solar input into this would be what? Close to 40 something amps in order to get to, I think 4,400 watts is what they say on the spec sheet. Because the voltage is so low on the MPPT and you only have one input. So yeah, there's a lot of little things on this unit that just don't add up. That isn't to say that I don't like I said, like I don't like the idea of it. I do. I just think I would tweak a lot of stuff on here. Plus having that shut off on the DC side, like this needs a dedicated breaker over here. Either have a breaker on the batteries, which I understand, maybe they don't want to do that. Then have a breaker on the inverter. Have it up here somewhere on the DC side. Also on the AC input, I saw on the DIY solar forum, they were advising people to plug it into the wall. So have a regular outlet plug, like an extension cord, and then put the other end of it into the AC input here in order to feed for charging the batteries. But it comes factory set, I think, at 40 amps of charging. I think it was set to that, if I remember correctly. I think it is. So that's going to pull way more than your standard wall outlet can output. So you can always adjust it here on the inverter, but yeah, there's a lot of little things like that. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think on the unit. I didn't do a huge amount of load tests on it or anything, but let me show you. Actually, let me show you something. So this is the EG4 3000 watt unit that you would see on a lot of the cart builds, and this has a 500 volt MPPT on it. So you can put 5,000 watts into this relatively simply, not overly complicated to get that much solar into this, even though it only has one input. And it's around the same size. I could always show you guys a view from the top, but it's pretty much the same size. It's actually a little smaller, but keep in mind this does have AC outputs right here, so you already have this ready-made. So that's taking up some of the space, but that's why a lot of people, if they're going to build this and put this on a cart, they have a little power strip there or a larger power strip with a couple different outlets on it too. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's not quite there yet. So, like I said, leave a comment below on your thoughts on this. And if you have one of these already, how much you like it or how it's working for you. And I'll put a link in the description below so you guys can check it out. You can read up on the specs. They have all the specs online, I think, as well. Thank you guys for watching and stay tuned.